like now.
All right, looks like we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome to our today's Metaverse Artist Talk by the one and only Claudia Hart at the WSPark. We're really happy that you can come here, and those of you who are also joining us later today with the broadcast or in the future. So I am today's host. I am Snow Yunxue Fu. We will actually get to have all of the speakers today introduce themselves in a little bit. But before that, I just want to go over quickly a few different things, as well as showcasing a bit of kind of mentally and virtually where we're at, right? Relating to this event as our final event of the season with the new show of WSPark that is on view right now. So let's take a look at our order of events today. So with a little bit of an intro, we will hear from all of the speakers and a little bit also about the context of both the exhibition and also the artist talk. We're so excited to have Claudia Hart here today to share with us her practice. It will be a very informative and I think emotional in some ways, and I will kind of explain why, content that we will hear. And then after that, we'll have a bit of a Q&A. So with me and also Sylvain, we have some questions prepared for Claudia, but the Q&A is also open to all of you who are able to join us live. So feel free, even throughout the event, if you have any comments or have any questions, please write down in either the YouTube comment section, or if you're joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to also write there. We will be able to see your comments and questions throughout. And then if we have some time at the end, we will be able to highlight some of those questions for answer. And then you also see on the screen the link tree to all of the links relating to WSPark. So it probably is where bring you to the YouTube talk today. But if you want to visit the WSPark, the links are also there, as well as our documentations of formal events and exhibitions. So before the artist and speakers intro, I want to just share a little bit of the look of our Sensar exhibition currently that is on view. So you should be able to see our senior thesis 3D exhibition that is by NYU Tisch Photo and Imaging Department student. So the exhibition is live right now on Sensar, the social VR platform. The exhibition was first opened at the beginning of this month. So looking back, already we have an eventful month with, first of all, the opening where we invited the chair and admin and students of photo imaging department here at NYU Tisch to talk about the exhibition setup, why it's virtual Washington Square Park, right? The relationship that NYU has with, the physical park that we model after, which is also this cultural hub of New York City, really. So in this exhibition, we showcase 46 current senior students who are about to graduate. So month of May is the graduation season, right? But even in April, we have opened up the show. So all of the senior students, as well as their family and friends and everybody else who can join all over the world online can come through the park and look at their artwork. So in this specifically pandemic affected times that we are all still living right now. We consider this exhibition unique, and then really provide access to the students' artwork. So feel free to definitely check the full exhibition out that is set up in a beautifully modeled virtual Washington Square Park, where every brick, every inch of grass, every trees, and as well as the monumental arch and the fountain area of virtual Washington Square Park are put in by our team and supported by the DSL collection, which we will hear in a little bit about as well. So that's a little bit of a teaser. We can go back to the speakers. Yeah, definitely, and check it out. And while we might be physically in different places, and our speakers might also be joining us in different continents, but virtually we're all there. And I think that's such a lovely thing, in a sense of considering what's the concept of Metaverse, right? And also this sort of simultaneity that internet, even though we're not fully maybe Web 3.0 yet, but as educators, as artists, we're definitely interested in always testing out the water, right? And that was one of the sort of drive for us to also set up this project. And so now I want to come back to the speakers and just have everybody introduce themselves a little bit before we go into the official part of artist Claudia Hart's talk. So again, I am your host today. I'm Snow Yunxue Fu. I am a New York-based artist, curator, and also the assistant professor here at New York University Tisch School of the Art Department of Photo Imaging. I'm also the lead organizer of the WSPark. Fortunately, have been working with the DSL collection since last fall. We have officially opened up the WSPark. Our first exhibition was called Land of the Post Photo. So using the VR version of the WSPark as a place of presenting emerging students' artwork who's working in the post-photographic medium, as well as this idea of 3D simulation, which we'll definitely be able to hear from Claudia today, as she's been engaged in this medium for such a long time. I should also quickly mention that Claudia is also a foremost teacher of mine when I was a student at School of the Art Institute of Chicago. So graduated 2014 with MFA, and I was also fortunate to be able to teach at School of the Art Institute for a while afterwards, and now developing curriculum and working with students in NYU Tisch School of the Arts. So that's a little bit about me. Next, I would actually like Hailin Liu, who is the project assistant of this event and the project, to introduce a little bit about herself. Hailin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hailin. I'm one of the art studio assistant of Snow. And I recently just graduated from SAIC from film video department. Yeah, I'm also right now I'm working as like a visual artist and also an animator.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hailin, for being able to join us, and also your help with making this event realizing. And next, I'm going to have actually Claudia Hart introduce a little bit about herself first.
Okay. All right. So, hi. I am very happy to be here because my work has always been about history and the process of history. And I like to personalize history as my story, being also the story of the medium I work with, because it's sort of true. So what that means is I started working with 3D simulations 25 years ago. And as the possibilities grew and the medium grew, I occupied the expanding spaces of virtuality. And that meant in the beginning, I used 3D animation, but not in a narrative way, not in a Hollywood way. I actually did pioneer the idea that This could be post-experimental film, post-video, post-art photography. And my first work was actually a 9-channel animated installation, which Snow I showed at NYU. Right. But not the one you're at, the one that's downtown that Luke is running. And so it's always been about history. When people started to use the word metaverse, I was a little bit confused because it's a recent word. So I started thinking, what's a metaverse? And I am going to tell my idea of a metaverse as a universe, the personal universe of an individual artist. So I wrote a story about that, and that's what I'm going to tell. But it's particularly lovely because with Snow here, and Hai Ling also was a student of mine about 4 years ago, and then became more the mentee of Snow. We see how art works. It passes through generations and mutates and changes and grows as it passes from one generation to the next. And that is sort of the theme of my talk as well. So to be hosted by Snow, who is actualizing many of the things we discussed in classrooms as Washington Square universe, and in her own very personalized version of many of those discussions. And Snow, you were also my undergraduate student.
Yes, I was.
BFA and MFA. So that's what we're going to do. And that's why it's particularly touching and lovely for me to be here with Snow. That's my intro.
Such a pleasure. And thank you so much for that wonderful intro, Claudia. We're in for a lovely ride.
Yeah.
And then last person to introduce is Sylvain Levy. And Sylvain is one of the founding person of the DSL collection, which is really a key instrument for realizing the VR WSPark. And I would love to have Sylvain introduce himself a little bit, as well as giving us a little bit of a context of the main project, as well as today's talk. Thank you, Sylvain.
First, thank you very much for having me on this experience, and thank you very much, Snow, for all you've been doing with all your team. Once again, I'm always very, really touched, but also very inspired by what you're doing. I think, Claudia, there are two things which I shall say came to my thought, my mind when you were talking. It's first the idea of transmission. I think that what is important today is to transmit not only by the way of being influencer, but to transmit. And the idea of transmission from a student, a teacher to a student, a professor to students, I should say, who are experiencing this in the family, in the DSL, because DSL is a collection family, a family collection. And today we are also transmitting the collection to our children as a cultural entrepreneurial project. And I can see how, as you said, it is changing, it is enriched. Because the other thing which is interesting, what you said, and because of your background, I do believe that it's important to be from today, but it's important to also have the roots of being from before, from the past. I think that we need the heritage to understand the present and also to envision the future. And so, but what you're doing, linking the past to the present and also the future, because the metaverse is still the future, I think you are really among the most interesting person to follow on this new journey that we have entered into this new world where everybody has a digital twin, and we have to bring to this digital twin emotions. You know, I want to be very clear. It's technology which serves art and not art which serves technology. And unfortunately today, I shall say, there is a lot of project, I shall say, under the idea of technology, especially called NFT. But if you look at this project, behind there is nothing. It's just they are trying to, under this new technological word, hype word, it's very, very, I should say, there is nothing interesting inside. But what you're doing, Snow, what you're doing, Claudia, what you're doing, what have we been experiencing since today with your projects? I think that you're really opening the doors in the right way, and you are really pushing the people to look at where we have to look for understanding what is the future. And once again, thank you very much, and I will be very happy to follow you, Claudia, in this presentation today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sylvan, for that
I'm
lovely
honored.
info. Wonderful. So just a quick reminder, any of the audience who are joining us live, feel free to write down your comments and question. But next, I would like to put Claudia Hart on the central stage for her artist talk portion of today's event. Go ahead, Hailing, we can share her slide.
All right, you want to start with number 1, Hailing? First slide, because it's just a title. All right, so how to build a metaverse. That's the name of this story. And I must say, I meant it somewhat ironically because metaverse seems to be, to most people, something to do with NFT space, something to do with game space. But in fact, my idea of how to build a metaverse, which is from an artistic point of view, how to build, is that I had to build my own artistic universe, and that became my metaverse. So how to build a metaverse, main thing is you got to put aside 20 years or 25, and that's how you build a metaverse. So let's go to the story. I'm going to tell this as a story. So I also want to mention that I'm telling the dolls story, and the dolls is a project that actually is based on work I did in 2010, and it has been renewed many times in the ensuing years. And part of the reason that I wrote this text that I'm going to read you is that I was invited to bring the dolls again out and to reframe them and to show it. And hopefully that all works out. You never know. But it's supposed to be in the fall. And so I wrote this text really for the curator that I'm going to be working with, and the several curators who will be working on the next more expanded version of the dolls. And I was happy with the story. So I'm just going to read it to you. Usually I'm a very improvised speaker, but this I am reading because it became the story, which is my story and which is the story of how to build a metaverse. So here we go. In 2015, I was commissioned by the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where I've taught for the past 15 years, to stage a performance as part of their annual fashion fundraiser. I decided to hybrid, designing a performance that would be part ballet, part fashion walk, with ballerinas rather than fashion models performing. I designed an animated setting for 5 dancers, and you could see that to the right. It's a shot of the live performance for the 5 dancers. The choreography for the dolls was composed by Christina Isabel and performed by her dance company. Christina's ballerinas wore paper doll dresses instead of tutus. I projected other animations onto the paper dresses as the ballerinas performed. I filled the dancers' moving shadows with other projections, also imagining those shadows as screens. The dancing shadows filled with animations mutated and changed in real time. My inspiration for the piece was inspired by my history, always my source. And this is what Sylvan mentioned, and thank you for understanding that, Sylvan. I look to the past in order to predict the future. That's what I have always done for 25 years. So far, I've done a pretty good job and have been a pioneer in the field of virtual reality for that long. The past reliably is the key to the early arrival at future art forms. This time, for the dolls, I turned to the visionary architects of the 18th century, but my architectures were not solid. Mine were not, like theirs were not. Theirs were paper. Mine were dematerialized, transformed into flickering animated projections that transformed my doll's world into an imaginary non-site, a fantastical, hypnotic place. Can we go to the third slide, please? Usually I work alone. Unlike you, Snow, I rarely use assistants. That's because I'm an improviser. I begin by researching a general concept, then I see where that might lead. I mold installations like a potter might mold clay. I change my plans, swerving from my original ideas and letting my art direct itself. It goes where it needs to go. There's no script. I don't follow my own rules or anybody else's. Virtual reality media, meaning 3D animation, VR, and AR, are technically demanding. Building the assets for my projects is a slow, labor-intensive, painstaking process. Because of this, it is virtually impossible for me to ever start from scratch. I'm forced to build on my own past to save time, recycling old software files. I start a project by designing a single element. I use that to make one piece, and then build another related piece using the elements from the first in the second. And then the elements of the second piece are repurposed in the third one. Eventually, they transform into this thing we now call Metaverse. My worlds evolve, growing very slowly over numbers of years. They are provisional. So, how to build a Metaverse? Rule 1, spend 20 years. And what you're seeing to the right is actually a version of the dolls that is for expanded cinema. There's one dancer with a movie screen. You could see shadow filled behind her. And it's a very rich, complicated, highly visual, extremely saturated kind of image, which mixes real-time animation and live dancers and projected animation. So the Dolls was born in an early version, back to the story, in 2010. Can you go to the fourth slide? The fourth image. So the Dolls' immersive world was built on top of 2 earlier works. I cannibalized old software files, remixing them to create something new. In fact, the concept of the remix, used specifically for popular music, could also be transferred to computer graphics when they came into popular use 10 years later after music was remixing. Remixing means taking a snippet from older digital files to recombine them into something new. So I want to show, before I read further, Hai-Ling, let's show a little clip of this empire, which is the world that I built the dolls on. And let's just... Okay, I think that's a little piece. And I wanted you to see it because the sound for that is actually the base of the sound for the dolls. And we'll play that a little bit later. But the image you saw, Empire, Kurt Henschlager made a new score for the dolls. But to do that, he remixed and expanded on Empire. And Empire was my first mixed reality piece. It combined live performance with a projected 3D world. This is a strategy that we now called worlding, virtual world building. So let's go to the 5th slide, please. Empire was a piece commissioned for the Wood Street Gallery in Pittsburgh, which was and still is a digital art gallery, a public art center. It was commissioned by the curator Murray Horn. It featured a 4-screen continuous surround animation. You saw 3 of those screens in the last clip, of a virtual monument running the course of empire, meaning it was about collapse, how empires grow and then collapse. It was inspired by the 1836 paintings that you see on the right, the bottom part, actually 4 pictures that were painted in 1836 by the Hudson River School artist Thomas Cole. He made paintings that show empires as slowly decaying and collapsing. And I did the same thing. I made an animated world that transited and collapsed, and the bodies that you saw collapse and vines grow over them over the course of the piece, which is actually 10 minutes long. We only saw about a minute or 2. That piece borrowed a cenotaph drawn by the image on top that you see, the architectural image. It was designed by Etienne Louis Boulet, the 18th century French visionary architect, for its source. So while that image and these images you see on the right were static, I made a work that I imagined as an animated version of a painting, which is why it moves so slowly. It decayed and morphed as the sun set from pink to blue, from sunrise to sunset, as the camera zoomed in. Can we go to the next slide, number 6, please? Oh, we're there. All right, cool. For the opening, I directed a performance featuring the composer Ella Buckley, and that was the woman who did the music that Court, my husband, who did the music for the dolls, remixed and also added his own voice to it. Anyway, I made a performance piece there where I made Ella into a performance object. That means I projected on her and she was on view during the installation opening. The piece consisted of a box constructed from crude scrim fabric, situated in the center of the installation space. The performer wore a dress designed by experimental designer Christian Mariani Freeman using a plastic screen material. It was actually material for a movie screen. And on it, I projected an animated rose. My idea of the performer's dress doubling as a projection screen was later transformed into the dolls, which we'll see next, returning and evolving into these paper doll tutu screens that I use for the dolls. Let's just show a bit of this, Hailing. It is a movie, not really a movie, but scenes of the performance by Ella Buckley, the performance object. Behind it the screens of Empire, the 4 screens of animation.
Scenes of the performance by Ella.
Very good, thanks. I want to mention, it's just about improvising. When they recorded the live performance of Ella during the performance, something went wrong with the video cameras. It was very chaotic, and we ended up having no video. And I made this entire documentation from still images, which is sort of how things are normally happen in the land of technology, where nothing works and we have to improvise and play with it, because I'm not a Hollywood filmmaker. I'm a single maker. I'm a single artist in the old-fashioned way, working by myself in the studio, and I don't have a staff of 500 animators. So can we go to the 7? Before we go and I read a little further, well, no, let's wait. I'm going to read a little further. I'm correcting myself, and self-correction is the process of creation. So here we go. Both the 2010 Empire and the 2015 dolls were inspired by the notion of nation states, born, rising to power, overextending, depleting, and finally collapsing, to be replaced by the next rising power. For the dolls, I asked the composer Kurt Henschlager to use Ella Buckley's music that you heard in the previous set to remix. He composed his own piece using hers as a background sound base, now refreshed into a new composition for a different aesthetic. I switched aesthetics over the years, one that I had developed over the 10 years between, I think it was 5 years between Empire and dolls, or 4 years. It was some few years. Both the dolls and Empire express the philosophical notion of the eternal return, an idea of history as a process of growth, decadence, decay, and rebirth. I have worked on this theme for the past 20 years. The music for the dolls expresses it. New things built on top of older dead things through the process of creation that I used to fashion it. In all ways, the story of the dolls is a story of renewal. The dolls ride again and again and again, as you will soon see. And Hailing, can we play this as a 2.5-minute excerpt? It starts in the middle of the dolls' performance, which is 10 minutes long.
Welcome.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can we go to slide 8, please? Thank you. All right, so that dolls piece I wanted you to see was actually an installation version of the first dolls slide, which had 8 dancers. I turned it into several iterations. One of them was the still image we showed a few slides ago, which was for cinema, expanded cinema made for movie theater. And I showed it in a movie theater with a giant movie theater sized projection behind it. The one I just played was installation based. So I actually toured the installation based one to quite a few sites, and we adapted to the architecture of wherever we were and projected on that. And those only had single dancers, again, returning to the idea of the performance object, a piece of sculpture, which was a living being, which was a movie screen. I started with that project the previous year. So to return to my story, the dolls chronologically, the year before I did the first dolls for SAIC with 5 dancers, in 2014, I was a resident of the Eyebeam Center for Art and Technology in New York. I produced there a mixed reality spectacle using augmented reality and trackable patterns to create sculptural costumes. Created in collaboration with performer, composer, and sound designer Edmund Campion, with whom I still work, Alice's Walking, that was the name of this Eyebeam story, mashed together augmented technologies, live streaming, sculpture, cocktails, and opera. It was an experimental fashion show about spectacle, looking at others. I wanted to portray a culture so addicted to our devices that we could only suffer the tangible world when it's filtered through them. And I think that really came through in the world today when we sleep with our iPhones. I designed custom fabrics at that time with patterns that doubled as QR codes, triggering scrambled, mashed up versions of Lewis Carroll's 1865 Alice's Adventure in Wonderland as flickering animations. And that was the idea of the piece, that was its starting point. I expanded on Carroll's 19th century notion of madness to the live computational network, the internet. Madness was to me the internet, and it truly is in the present iteration of misinformation that we now live. Steeped in cliche ideas about ominous AI, robots, and the data-driven, in Alice's Walking, I endowed them with a punk romantic aesthetic. My live production was interactive and featured 5 performers wearing constructed website dresses, sheathed and augmented in these patterned fabrics. Clothing designer Julie Robinson and I designed architectural costumes, which you see there on the right, which were engineered and fabricated by Julie, who's a fashion designer now. She was a student then. During the performance, select audience members were invited to launch an augmented reality application on their phones and tablets. When they looked at the patterns and the costumes, the tablets recognized, and the augmented app, the custom app, the inscribed patterns. While the performance investigated breakdowns between the natural and the technological, it was also conceived as a means to create a new experience of a human-computer interface. So these costumes were actually, I thought of them as website dresses or interfaces, and you can see these sculptural avatars which reappear in different forms over and over. And I want to say that these augmented patterns come back in a later version of the dolls. At a certain point, the dolls merged with the Alices. The Alice was a doll, and that was what happened. It was some kind of crazy children's universe. And by the way, that's me on the left, and the picture on the left, I'm the one with the mask. And you see Carla Ganis. She was also, I think we see a better photo of her, but that's her hand over there on the right. I think we have another picture of her next. She was one of the live, and let's go to the next image, please. Number 9. So that I'm going to tell you, the Alices were performed by Nayland Blake, who's a very famous performance and artist himself, and a novelist, June Lee, Julie, Adrienne Seck, who was the one in front. She was 80 at the time, very well-known performance artist from the 60s, and music by Edmund Campion. And on stage was Carla Snow. She was one of the live performers with her then partner, Justin Petropoulos. So you're going to see her in the movie. Hai Ling, let's play a little clip of the dolls, and we'll see Carla in there, and also the president of our school, our former school, Snow, my current school is there, and Ellen Sandor Snow is in there. Okay, thanks. So can we go to the slide 10? So can we go to the next one, Hai Ling, to slide 10? Thank you. So this one, that was the Dolls 2014 live performance at Eyebeam. And what you see on the right here was the 2015 version of Dahl's 5-dancer version, made 1 year later. I got the Dahl's commission at that point from SAIC. For that new Dahl's, I translated the idea of a hyper-mediated fashion show opera into a hyper-mediated fashion show ballet. As with the Alice's, I covered my world with flickering patterns, this time animated rather than augmented and seeing the animation through the phone. For an even later version of the Dahl's, I actually recycled the augmented patterns produced for Alice, remixing them into my initial Dahl's design. And we're going to see a bit of that later. Over the course of several years, those two worlds, the Dahl's and the Alice's, collided due to economic necessity and my temperamental necessity of recycling earlier files, meaning I want to make everything by myself without assistance and make it up as I go along. So I'm limited in how much one human can produce. Until finally, the two projects became indistinguishable from one another. So can we go to 12, please? So this is a picture of the actual doll set that we used for the 5-channel version. It was a black and white still image, and there was animation that we saw in the middle of it. You saw in an excerpt above. So channeling the 1999 sci-fi action film, The Matrix, I created a graphical language for the Dahl's ballet using a mathematical computer grid as the central motif for our technological era. With 3D software, I built virtual reality architecture for my stage set simulations of dollhouses projected on monumental 25-foot screens. I imagined the environment as a computer warehouse filled with old dollhouses, culled from the junk heap of some future history. I selected from a multitude of free 3D models, then available as shareware for all users of the internet, the models populating Google Earth, and at that time stored in its archive, then called the Google 3D Warehouse. This seems very normal nowadays, but in 2014, Google Earth and Google 3D Warehouse was a novelty, and it changed contemporary art, that young artists could appropriate all of these millions of models or hundreds of thousands of models. So I scoured Google for architectural monuments from a decadent history, past empires from all over the world. These included the Ark of Labna, a Mesoamerican architectural site and ceremonial center from the pre-Columbian Mayan civilization. I took the Roman Forum of Caesar, Marie Antoinette's, who had her head chopped off, if you remember, with Louis XIV or the 16th. Marie Antoinette's Le Petit Trianon, which was a little chateau built on the grounds of Louis XIV. It's actually the 16th, Versailles, where she dressed as a milkmaid with her ladies in waiting. I took a Queen Anne house from Victorian England, the Dragomar mansion from Bucharest, and the Paulwell house, which is still a ruined house standing in Detroit. Can we go to the next 11? I think it's 11. Yeah, but unfortunately it's not. That was actually a GIF, but we're not seeing it as a GIF, but oh well. In the Dahl's Media Ballet, I molded mathematical cycles into visual form, creating rhythmic animated patterns projected onto paper doll dresses. I did this to create pulsing algorithms that are physically mesmerizing and intentionally hypnotic. I wanted to hypnotize my viewers so they would lose track of time, to lull them into a reverie so they would no longer perceive whether a minute or an hour had passed. My subject has always been history. Therefore, my medium became time. Now we go, somehow we went out of order, but let's go to, we already did this one. Yeah. So let's go to 13, please. Sorry about that, but it doesn't really matter because it's all the same story. Like my dolls' houses, my paper billboard tutus were also drawn from a fallen empire. The gowns of Marguerite Teresa of Spain, among the last of the Spanish Habsburgs. By the way, she married Louis XIV and was later murdered by him. But anyway, the 14th, not the 16th. This child princess was the central figure in the famous painting Las Meninas, which is to the right, a canonical masterpiece by the great 17th century court painter Diego Velázquez, and the subject of many of his paintings. The Velázquez princess dresses were modeled by computer and then repainted by hand on watercolor paper. And you can see that in the picture on the lower right, which is Christina Isabel wearing one of those paper doll handmade dresses, which has been glued to cardboard, which I also used as a movie screen. I then designed animated patterns that pulsed to Kurt Henschlager's atmospheric rhythms, which were built on the last Empire, the Empire soundtrack, and projection mapped them back onto the ballet dancers' dresses, who were strapped into these cardboard princess dresses you see on the right, which doubled as a movie screen. The resulting experience was strange, hallucinatory, and transformed each dancer into surrealistic mechanical paper doll. Can we go to 14, please? We're almost done. So here we see, on the right, we see Fabergé eggs from the Romanov Empire, and we see Apple logos that I sort of mutated. And on the left, we see a dancer wearing that paper doll dress being projected, the right animation onto her paper doll dress, and then channeled back in. The shadows behind her, which are moving, are filled with further the same animations. So it's very confusing and hypermediated and hypnotizing. My doll's flickering patterns were crafted from motifs based on the heraldry of other collapsed empires, from Fabergé eggs of the House of Romanov to the banners and heraldry of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire. Alongside these were also the logos and graphical icons drawn from US multinational corporations. Combined into gridded patterns, the result of seeing them all together is in some ways like a stroll through Times Square or a glitzy night in Vegas. But it is also, paradoxically and strangely, quite trance-inducing and meditative. So it's Times Square, but slowed down somehow. This was intentional. The dolls was created to induce contemplation on the passage of time and the death of kings, and meant to be a vehicle for some kind of enlightenment. Can we go to slide 15? All right, we're gonna see a movie, but not yet, Hailem. The Doll's House from 20, whatever year I made it, 2015, I repurposed again for an installation at Transfer Gallery in Brooklyn. That was in 2016, curated by Kalani Nicole. And I materialized the projections mapped onto the ballerinas as a looping monumental 50-foot projection. I wanted to translate the feeling of live performance into the gallery. To do this, I reframed my stage set animations, making a new one. I changed the proportions of the buildings in my 3D software file to approach real dimensions. So they were almost building size, right? When in relation to the size of people when they entered the gallery. I wanted the people to be the performers and enter a giant space where the dolls' houses were like the size of small real houses. I wanted viewers to feel like they might be inside of the buildings, that they might even be the dolls. And so therefore I created a series of miniature figures, 3D printed sculptures at real doll scale based on the paper costumes worn by my ballerinas. I produced a new work, yet deployed the same digital assets. So that's a picture of the installation. And Hai-Ling, can we play a clip from the movie, the installation movie?
Eat. Welcome. No. Welcome. No. 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 No.
Thank you. Let's go back to the 16, because the latest version, the slide 16, please. The latest version of the dolls came in 2021, and this was a social VR world in the metaverse to be viewed either on browser or through a Vive or Oculus headset, available for purchase as an NFT produced in an open edition. It sits on the Mozilla Hub's platform. The dolls was commissioned by Julie Walsh, an American curator for Medientage, a Munich media festival. The dolls also recycles models initially built for the Dolls Ballet. For it, I also remixed the 2014 Alice is Walking, rechanneled the fabric patterns initially produced to create trackable costumes, and I repurposed them as animations to texture map a VR environment. Can we go to 17, please? I want to show this because it's also a live performance. So the Hub's dolls then served as a site for a fifth dolls. Welcome to the Doll's House, a real-time live performance, Welcome to the Doll's House, featuring a custom avatar that I produced along the way somewhere in time, initially designed for an animation in my Alice series, but now taking the form of a 3D computer model, inspired by sculptural costumes covered with tangible augmented reality fabrics that Julie and I produced for Alice's Walking performances. In this 2021 dolls version, all of my metaverses collided to become a massive, complex liminal stew. Welcome to the Doll's House featured Matthew Gant, a composer specializing in social VR live performance. Matthew wrote music that he performed, embodied by my custom avatar, and that was produced by Hyphen Hub's agency, and it toured all of these Mozilla Hub's international festivals that proliferated during lockdown quarantine. Let's end by just showing a clip from this one. And so you could see this complete translation of the dolls once again.
Welcome. Eat. Eat.
Um, I think we could just end here. I only had one more slide and it's not necessary, but I want to add that the reason I'm rethinking the dolls again is that I'm in a very big show in Berlin that is about immersive worlds and the metaverse. And the curator who knew my practice wanted to combine all of the versions of the dolls and expand further. We're going to have the live dancers for opening night. We're going to have a 3-channel projection that I'll remake a new version for that particular site specific. We're going to have the Metaverse version that you see here, but we're going to expand it further. And all of the other artists, they took my idea and decided that all of the installations should be built in Metaverse version, who are also in this show in the real world. And as I started this practice with the idea of selling iterations of the world, or like imagining them as Airbnb rentals, that you could rent one for an iteration of my Hubs world for a month. And that was the NFT. So that's it. I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was so many great stuff. If we may, to use a little bit of a time next to have a bit of a conversation. There's so much to, I think, unpack in a way. So I will start, and then I think Selvin will have some comments and questions that he would like to share as well. Yeah, it really brings me, Claudia, just I think in a way like back into memory lane, right? As your student, I remember some of those projects as they play out when you had your Eyebeam live performances, and and I was actually attending the recent Metaverse live performances there too, the last video that we saw.
Oh yeah, you were in there.
Yeah. It was
Does it
great.
say Snow in there?
I think it might, or maybe I might have used like a different alias that day.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think like the thing about internet metaverse is like you can be yourself, but you can also just like be a different avatar, I guess. But I even want to kind of go back to the like kind of my history with you in the beginning a little bit. And I think there's more of like general comments, but there's probably question in there too. So just bear with me a little bit. Like I remember as this young artist actually stepping into your class for the first time, and having the background as a painter and also in photography and sculpture. Like the way that you have opened up the possibility of a 3D environment, the post-photo medium just makes so much sense to me that I like to quote you describing that the 3D world, the virtual space is or the 3D software is really this kind of epistemological. Exactly, yeah. It's a big word. It's hard for me to pronounce, but models of the world, which I think just so precisely capturing so the breadth and depth of kind of like the possibilities that one can utilize this medium in terms of art making. I mean, granted, with your artist talk, we can see from so many examples that your practice is such an interdisciplinary, right? Kind of, there is this freedom, I think, in sense of it can be performance, it can be, live theater, it can also be sort of painting, it's in the context of post photo. I just love that kind of freedom that you have in terms of being an artist, that you're not sort of just limiting yourself to one thing, but rather I think virtual media in a lot of ways kind of provides us kind of more options. But then it's also funny because it's this concept of metaverse is sort of all in one too, right? I think like you said it really well. How do you build a metaverse? You do it for like 25 plus years, and I think that's a real right.
You live it.
Right. And that's a real, I think, great way to kind of highlight like the spirit of metaverse. I think, Sylvain earlier on in other events have mentioned too, like right now in the recent years with the catalyzing by the pandemic, it is a buzzword that people say, but, I think in your cases, you have been doing metaverse, before that term gets cornered. And, in a way, I really am glad to paying you tribute, right? An artist like you who's, really sensitive to the medium and the message and the discussion, of the time of the like the era, and then, sort of being involving your practice throughout, but now, right, like while a term like the metaverse sort of corners it and kind of brings a broader audiences, right? I think really thinking about the younger generation too, and me being a teacher too, that I'm very much sort of trying to open up that possibility right now to my student as well. So the question kind of comes from when you first engaged with the post photo medium, kind of what were you sort of kind of maybe expecting in a way, right? Like I remember being your student, like something that you mentioned, like, there's really kind of few people really understanding this medium who's, not necessarily like working in the industry, commercial or film setup, but really kind of pushing, right, the boundary of the two. And now to sort of the past, couple years, and now, with like social VR, like 3D web 3.0 being like a pretty close possibility. Like if you can maybe look back when you first kind of start engaging this medium.
What did I think I was doing?
What were you sort of what?
I always thought I was doing what I'm doing because I was trained to be an art historian.
Right.
So I was always trying to figure out, I knew when I first started, I saw Toy Story 1 in pre-release in 1995 in the Berlin Film Festival. And I'm not a fan of cartoons, and my mom never even allowed me to watch TV, so I basically never saw any. And I saw that because someone gave me a free ticket, and I thought, oh my God, this is like the Renaissance perspective meets photography. I had that insight. That's why I wanted to learn it. And then from the time I started working with it, I was constantly trying to figure out how it fit into art history. Yeah. When I came to SAIC, I had to teach it. Yeah. So part of teaching it made me had to figure out how it worked, and because I was teaching at a humanities-oriented art school, not at a tech. Many other schools are industry training oriented, so they teach you modeling 1, modeling 2, animation 1, animation 2. So I know you're not doing that either at NYU, and that was not ever what I could imagine doing, and also was not the culture I was in. So I had to figure out, how does this fit into contemporary art? How does this fit into moving images? What's the language? I would sit there with you all and say, let's invent a word. What do you think we're doing? I think you might have even been in the class where what did we call it? We called it simulism. Right. And we were trying to think, what is it that we're doing? We were surrounded by very historically oriented, humanities theory oriented school. And I was trying to put it within that context. So that started when I started working there in 2007. That ramped up what I was already, the way I already thought, which is why they hired me, by the way, because they told me, you're the only technologist we ever met with a degree in art history. And that was also why I didn't fit in my own generation, because they were techno-utopianists who were like, they were all saying, wow, it's great. And I was like, I'm not so sure about that. And they were like, how dare you? How dare you think you're not so sure about it? But Sylvain, I did use the past to predict the future, and I knew there was going to be these problems because I was looking to the past and I saw how things cycle and recycle, they collapse, they grow. And the fact that the utopian internet turned into the algorithmic spreader of misinformation and fear-mongering and brought in right-wing autocracy, etc., all over the world was like, those of us who knew that. I wasn't the only one, but Sylvain, because we knew history.
Right. Yeah, that's really great. That I think leads probably to Sylvain, and you know, I think DSL also as a collection cares about history, and you know, also this idea of with the global perspective in mind, right? Having first of all, Chinese contemporary art kind of as a focus, and in recent years, really, you know, looking at technology and how it affects artists, and you know, Claudia's work, I think, really highlights that too, emphasis-wise. So. Yeah, what would you like to ask Claudia, or any thoughts you'd like to share after the artist talk?
Your sound is off.
Yeah, I'm back. Claudia, I'm really impressed. You know, first, a little bit like you, we've been in the art world for a long time. We've been in the art world 37 years. And I've seen a lot of things in the art world since we begin to collect. Really, we experienced a lot of things. We experienced a lot of things, how the society has changed and how the art world has changed because of the society. What I like with you is that you stay focused on humanism. You stay focused on I shall say, the roots of a human being, and especially with art. I think that in a world which looks like 1984 2.0, the only way to counterbalance that is to bring humanism. And this is exactly what you're trying to do. So I like the spirit of the whole way you've been moving through, shall I say, all these times. Today, the question is that naturally we have to stay utopian, but also we have to be relevant, to try to understand the people and to make digestible what we do and to make it relevant. Relevant means to bring food for the thought and not just to make things which cannot be understood or cannot be relevant because people we don't think that it's something for them or it's too complicated. So we have to balance always between being popular, between populist in a certain way, but also to keep our soul without selling our soul to the devil. So it's a very difficult time if we want to try to manage all that.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit your spirit, and I'll try, in my way. We try with the collection in our way to find this kind of balance. What I'm interested is when you speak of the metaverse, for you, the metaverse, first I would like to have your definition of the metaverse. And is the metaverse a medium for you, or it's a place where people will experience something? Do you use the metaverse as a new medium to create something? Or it's just you create something that you bring into the metaverse? And I think this is very important.
Yeah.
I think when an artist expresses himself, he has to be very clear in the medium that he uses. If he uses an NFT, he has to explain why it's an NFT as a medium, and not just say, I've done an NFT. And if and this is very important at our times, to be very clear in the way you want to express yourself, which is not the case for many, many artists at this moment. where
Well, I think I'll tell you what I think the metaverse is. It's interesting because I am working with another curator who wants to do a project with me, which has to do with archiving. And to me, the metaverse is one giant Maya software file, which actually contains everything I ever did in it.
Mm.
And strangely enough, the dolls, and the curator is Kalani Nicole, with whom did one version of the dolls, and who I'll work on a metaverse version of it. Because if you look at what the dolls ended up, it has in it, literally as a file, in this software file, 10, oh my God, 13 years worth of work.
Hmm.
So that file from which I build iterations or world building, because I'm a simulations artist and it is the medium of what is a metaverse. It's a 3D world that's extensive. It's world building, a complex, big, rich space. In my case, it's my life. It's actually a software file.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I want to do with Kalani is to archive. That's why we're talking about, what do you archive? My works, of course, my works, the movies, the software applications, etc. But you gotta, in my case, and this is probably true of most digital artists, archive our software files and our software, right? Because our software is the metaverse that we expand upon. And as these softwares become more complex to build a metaverse, maybe we use a collection of 6 or 8 softwares that we all use. We all surf between them, right? Some are experts in painting 3D models. Some are for shrink wrapping, right? Reducing polygons or whatever, right? Some are good for rendering. Some are good for real-time things that go into a game engine, real-time or physics-driven. But we have a language or a vocabulary for world building, and the metaverse is probably those software files because we keep building with them.
very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And that was why the curators who are interested in this idea of the archive were interested. And also that we can, and so open source, all these things about conserving the software becomes a giant issue. So one of the things that I'm involved in now is preserving augmented. It was like, because I've had about 6 platforms collapse under me, and now we all use web-based. So is there like a generic, like a .obj or a .jpeg format that's more conservable beyond the life of a software? And open sourceness means you can keep the source code. When museums collect digital artists, they save the source code for our platforms. That's conservation now. So the metaverse actually is the software, I would say.
Very, very interesting.
Yes. Yes, in a way, I think also about kind of like providing access, before social VR is even sort of widely accessible. It's like our Maya things, Maya projects, or in AR or VR form. But nowadays we can directly build online, and then our audiences can also in theory directly go in there. But even that, as it develops, is still quite unstable, right? And hopefully will get more and more stabilized. But I like, in a sense, your concept is broader than what is available right now. It's there, and it's kind of about this like master file in a way. So
that is what the metaverse is. If if it's all going to go where it's leading, where we're all on Web3 and building on Web3, then it's just like in the real world. When you build a building, it's not like you build it offline and then put it in the world. It's just continuous and ongoing.
Right. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I think this might be a really good place for us to end, though I'm sure from this artist talk lovingly given by Claudia, and also the questions that we've been starting to discuss, hopefully it's thought-provoking to our audiences who are able to join us live or join us later through the broadcast recording. I do want to, in the comment, put Claudia's website to everybody so that you can check out her Web 2.0's archive right now with that, as well as thank you, Hailing, for highlighting that on the screen, as well as the link again to all links with WSPark and its documentation, its archive. Yeah, thank you so much.
I also have a show up right now, folks, in San
please.
Francisco. Hailing, can we put in bitforms.com?
Oh, I can do that real quick.
Yeah, because I have an NFT, digital combines. I've been doing this series, which is hybrids between physical objects and NFT, and where I expand on the notion of hyper reality to include the idea of the NFT contract, or the NFT designated by contract of uniqueness. And I just want to add to you, because it's so nice to talk to you, Sylvain, and being old guys, right? Is that in the question and answer after the opening of the show, which was last Saturday, somebody said to me, "Is this the anti-Rafik show, Rafik Andal?" And I said, "No, I'm just following up my own interests. Like, this is just what I'm into." But because it was somehow considered revolutionary to keep the human into it, like to not just get up there and talk about markets, that they thought it was a protest show, that it was somehow not possible to actually look at art in this humanistic way, that it was somehow a thing of the past. Do you think that's true, Sylvain, or is it a thing of the past? It's just about markets?
I don't know what it is, but it's what I want to do. It's what makes me happy.
Yeah, right.
I think everybody has his own way to look at things in life.
Right. That's what I said. I'm just following up my interests, like.
That's it. I respect every other point of view, but it's not my story.
Yeah, this is my story. That's all. Yeah, exactly.
Everybody has his own story, and I'm very happy with my old, perhaps old, new, I don't know, new, old way to look at things. But at least I think it's the way for me to to get emotions, to be to reinvent myself. The big problem today is that the world is changing and people are not reinventing themselves. And you've been reinventing yourself with the same project. You have reinvented yourself so many times. And this is the most difficult things to do. And a lot of people today, they don't reinvent themselves, because just copy.
There's a lot of anxiety about change. And that's why we see, a lot of...
I don't feel anxiety. I think, it could be anxiety, it could be a challenge. I prefer the word challenge, personally.
Well, you're pretty unusual. And an
I don't know.
Well, maybe not. That would be great if you weren't. And there were many more of you. Okay.
It was really a pleasure to see all this discussion all together. I think it's very refreshing.
Yay.
Yeah.
All right.
To me, both of you are visionaries, and I think that's really aspiring. And I think especially for the younger generation, instead of just copying, right, what's already happened, or subscribe to what's already made, you know, one should always pushing, and you know, you two are definitely.
My students are always pushing.
Yeah, totally. So,
All right.
great. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks Hailing for help us running the event.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sylvain, for the support, and thank you so much, Claudia, for the lovely talk. And we're so happy to finish the talk with you this month for our WSPark project second show. But everybody, the show will be up throughout the summer and the year, so definitely check it out on Social VR Sensor. And we hope to see you all again. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Au revoir.